For those of you that don't know me, my name is Simon Han. I'm the CEO of the newly formed DeakinCo. Welcome you here today. This is our first event since we rebranded as DeakinCo. Hence, we've got some shiny new banners and brochures for you. Just quickly, DeakinCo is the merger of our corporate education business, Deakin Prime, which has been around for over 25 years, working with organisations around their professionalisation and staff development needs. More recently, Deakin created a business called Deakin Digital, which was really looking at disruption to education and where we thought the future of workplace learning and education might land. And out of that developed a micro-credentialing model that looks at recognition and measurement of people's capability within the workforce. Really excited with how that business has come together, and I've been the joint CEO of Deakin Prime and Deakin Digital for the past 12 months, and in looking at how those two, the service offerings, if you like, from those two businesses complemented each other in a way that we think we can add much greater value to our clients in helping them solve their challenges and looking at increasing performance in organisations. It was a logical fit to bring the business together. So like all good businesses, we spent a fortune with creative consultants to come up with the name DeakinCo and the new brand. So I hope you like it. It's one of those things, we've been living and breathing it and been very excited about it for a long time. You release out to market and people go, oh yeah, fair enough. So I guess if that's the reaction, that's good, because it means we haven't mucked it up. But really pleased to have you here today as DeakinCo. DeakinCo is very much looking at the challenges around the workforce of the future, and with change from digital disruption, globalisation and a whole range of factors impacting the rate of change on businesses, it's changing the way organisations need to find the right people with the right skills and particularly develop what those new skills are as we move forward. This is something we're really passionate about. It very much plays to what we're doing in the credentialing space. And people have been talking about the future of work and what that means. It's actually here. It's now. Organisations are already experiencing those rapid changes, and there are solutions we believe that can help with that skill development in a new and far more effective way than perhaps some of the tried and true messages of the past. Just before I introduce Connie, I just want to call out, one of our big investments this year has been commissioning Deloitte Access Economics to co-develop a white paper looking at soft skills for business success. We firmly believe, particularly with the workforce of the future, that soft skills will play an increasing part in the success of organisations and their performance around their people. Pleased to say that research is borne out in this report, which we launch on Wednesday back here. I think there's still a few spots if anyone's interested in that event, but we'll be launching that paper then. I'll just introduce Connie. Connie, testament to her and or the topic that she's talking about. I think this is one of the biggest events we've had that's been waitlisted for quite some time now. So obviously front of mind for people. And for Deakin, what was Deakin Prime, that the focus has really been around co-design through human-centred or design thinking approach over the last 2 years to really switch the paradigm from looking at sort of learning outcomes to performance outcomes and what that looks like in a blended 70-20-10 environment. But at the crux of that is the design process that comes out of that, and that's where we're going to hear from Connie today. So I'll introduce her, Connie Malamed. The surname apparently, I just found out, is teacher in Hebrew, so very appropriate surname for Connie. But look, in a world of instant information, how can employees acquire real knowledge, and how can they apply new skills on the job when change is the new normal, which is what I've touched on. So in today's workshop, Connie will examine the effects that new technologies, increased collaboration, bring your own device and social media will have on the learning and performance function. Connie will explore the emerging role of the learning team and ways we can discard outdated practices and implement strategies that are better aligned in today's workforce. The goal today is to find ways that learning and development team can remain relevant in a sea of change. Connie is a consultant, author and professional speaker. She's helped not-for-profit, government and corporate clients over her 20-year career in this space. Author of 2 books, The Visual Language for Designers and more recently Visual Design Solutions, written to bring greater awareness of visual design and to improve the design skills of learning. Connie also publishes, and encourage you to follow the e-learning coach website and podcast. So with great pleasure, welcome Connie to talk to us today. Thank you.
Wow, what a Wonderful crowd. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I have spent the weekend in Melbourne and I am having a great time. I think I've done so much in just 2 days. I went to up Eureka Tower, to Fitzroy area for food, the Federated Square, the Docklands, walking along the river, and so on and so forth. All the tourist things, and then trying to get a little bit of that backdoor travel in too. So it's a beautiful, beautiful city. I love the way the architecture seems like sculpture, and the sculpture is kind of architectural. I love the way that's merged. It's really wonderful. I'm so happy to be here. Just so I can get a survey of who's here, can you please stand up if you manage or supervise? I just want to see how many people here do that. Can you stand up if you manage or supervise? Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay. How many people actually do design and development work? Could you stand up? Okay. Some overlaps, right? Thank you so much. And how about, are there people here who do training, just stand-up training? Can you stand up? Okay. Great. What kinds of, thank you so much. Now I have a sense of who the audience is. I'm not going to change anything. I just wanted a sense. Just joking. I was wondering, is anyone here who didn't stand up? What kind of work do you do? Yeah, what's your job role?
Curation.
Curation, nice. Modern. Yes, you too? Okay. Anyone else? That's great, all right. Now here comes another survey. I would like to know if you can name one platform in your personal learning environment. Let's hear what people are using to find out information about work. Anybody here? Like, for example, YouTube, something like that. Anybody? Twitter, okay. Because a lot of times people will tweet links. Oh, and I meant to say, my Twitter handle is @eLearningCoach, and if I say anything brilliant, you are completely allowed to tweet it. And if I say anything kind of ignorant, please just ignore it. Or if I mispronounce, things, if I don't speak Australian correctly. What else are people using? Yeah?
LinkedIn and Lynda.
LinkedIn and Lynda.com. Anyone else? Yeah?
Coursera and TED.
Coursera and TED. Great. Snapchat. Okay. Instagram, Snapchat. Okay. This is an amazing statistic. 300 hours of video are uploaded every minute to YouTube. This is what YouTube says. 5 billion videos are watched on YouTube every day. It's kind of hard to believe, but this is around the world. Every month I get an email from Stanford Online with this great list of MOOCs. And you know that they're being given from universities all around the world. In 2016, MOOC enrollment grew to reach 58 million students. And I forgot to, I don't like to use too many acronyms. A MOOC is massive online or a massive open online course. And they're those courses that are typically given for free by university professors. And they can be very big. They can have thousands of people. Here's another one, amazing statistic. 500 million tweets are sent every day. And of course, many of these tweets have links to great information for learning. And now people are using Pinterest boards for learning about a particular topic. So because the internet is always on, our entire world has changed, as you know. Because information is no longer scarce. And the thing that I wonder about is how will the learning and development function remain relevant when people have all these other ways to get information? Learning and development can be bypassed a lot of times. So I'd like to quickly look at some drivers of change. What has made our world change so quickly in about maybe 5, 6, 7 years? Things have become so different because technology is the underlying trigger for a lot of these changes. And some of us, including myself, can get so into the technology that we may forget, and we never want to lose sight that all of this talk about technology is really for the purpose of helping people. That's our job. Look at the change, look at the rate, the acceleration of change that's happened in technology. From the 1970s till now, the curve has almost become vertical. And individuals are somewhat keeping up. Technology is completely interwoven into our life. But look at the gap. Businesses, especially large organizations, are having trouble closing that gap with technology. And even more so is public policy. Look at that gap. The gap between public policy, keeping up to date with what we need for technology is huge. And let me just go back to this for a second, because so often learning and development groups are stuck in outdated and older ways of operating. The structures, the technology, the hierarchical nature of things in organizations, that can really stop an organization from being agile and from catching up with today's technologies. One of the big changes that's been happening is that speed, the speed that knowledge changes. Does anyone here find it difficult to create courses, if you are creating courses, or if you're managing people, that can actually keep up with the speed of change? Anybody find that problem? Okay, a few people. It seems to me as though that this is going to increase, this problem. I interviewed Catherine Lombardozzi for my podcast, and she said by the time you get through 4 years of schooling, what you learned in your freshman year may be outdated. Anyone here paying college tuition? Because that's scary. So human resources has trouble hiring all the knowledge workers they need, because it used to be that people could be an expert in their field and kind of more or less know most about it. I don't even pretend to call myself an expert anymore. Well, I never did. There's just so much to know. And what I found, and what a lot of other people have found, is that your personal network often holds the knowledge you need. So if you have to find something out, and you have a nice, good, personal network, you can just ask someone. So in a way, the value is in your network. It's not even in the knowledge you have stored in your head. That's a whole new way of looking at things. Another really big change is the quantity of information that our societies are generating with technology. The computer industry used to speak in terms of kilobytes and megabytes and gigabytes and terabytes, and now they talk of petabytes, exabytes, zettabytes, and yottabytes. And I have no idea what that number, how to read that number there. So because we can collect big sets of data through XAPI and other standards, this can help us optimize and individualize learning, and in the future, we may be making a lot of data-driven learning decisions. And then because the internet is always on, the dissemination of learning research has really grown. So now it used to be shocking to say one training event isn't enough. And now I think like everyone knows that. 1 8-hour class is not going to stuff information into someone's head. So one training event isn't enough. People know that learning is a continuous process. It lasts your lifetime. So all of this research is being disseminated more than ever now. And of course, social and collaborative tools change our work culture. Can you raise your hand if you've seen a change in the work culture in the past 5 years because of collaboration? First of all, more people telework. In Australia, it's about 30%, I think I read. And teams can get together who would have never spoken to each other before because of collaboration tools. And all of this is leading to a mindset change where sharing is actually more valuable and more fun than hoarding knowledge. That whole idea, that whole concept of being competitive and hoarding knowledge is slowly dissipating because sharing is just better. It makes us all smarter. And I notice the people in our industry really share and teach a lot. I love it. But if your head is spinning, so are the employees where you work. I've read that people are so stressed and overwhelmed because of information overload, because it's really hard to keep up with all the technologies, because you might have to ask your 10-year-old to help you do something. Something's got to be wrong there. So I think it's kind of obvious that we really do need to evolve as an industry. I just feel like the people in our industry are so smart and so sharing that it shouldn't be that hard for us to go from one type of learning and one type of standard and just shift it a little bit. We need a mind shift because learning and development teams are no longer order takers. I think we need to have a political statement. We are not order takers. And that's because we're almost kind of too smart for that. We're problem solvers. We're solution finders. We're designers. That's what designers do. So the mind shift that I think we have to have is to stop being course-centric, and I can tell that some people already have made that mind shift. In a course-centric approach or perspective, every problem that anyone comes to you with requires a training intervention. So if someone says, people aren't using our system, they keep having problems and we're getting all these calls, well, maybe your system is bad. Maybe you need to redesign the software. Training can't help with that. And instead, we need to have a solution-centric mindset. And in that perspective, the solution space is wide open. And today I'm going to show you some really interesting examples of people who have solved problems in the L&D space from L&D departments, but in all kinds of different ways. So in a course-centric world, we push training from up on high out to employees. And in a solution-centric world, employees pull the content that they need. So it's one is push and one is pull. And in a course-centric world, learning is very separate from work. And in a solution-centric world, learning is contextual. If someone needs to learn something, maybe we can provide it to them in their moment of need. At least a lot more often than we do. Josh Burson, who's an HR industry analyst, and I guess he works for Deloitte, says that digital learning does not mean learning on your phone. It means bringing learning to where employees are. So where does course design fit in with all of this? I still design courses, and personally, I still like to take courses, but not all the time and not as frequently as we used to. So I do think that we will. I know there are some people out there who say, courses are dead, but the thing is, do you really want your surgeon to just go, hey, how do you cut the person? What about parachute packers? They need courses. There's so many instances where you're learning something new, and you can read about the 5 moments of need where it's recommended when to give courses and when not to. But you know what? If we are going to do courses, let's make them based on instructional science, because we know a lot now. We know, and this a lot of people don't know this, but that whole idea of people can process 5 plus or minus 2 bits of information, or was it 7? That's just not true. The person who came up with that, it's just not based on research. That's been thrown out the door. So it's 3 to 4 bits of information. Right now, that's what they think. Sure, the research could change. But working memory is the part of our cognitive architecture that is online. It's the part that space that you're in right now. It's where you manipulate information. And people can only manipulate about 3 to 4 bits of information at one time. Just try to multiply two two-digit numbers by each other. Pretty soon you're putting it down on paper. It's not because you're not smart, it's because that's the way working memory is. Try to remember a phone number that someone tells you just like that, the 7 digits. If you don't rehearse it or write it down or put it in your phone, you won't remember it. And it's normal. When I found that out, I felt so much better about myself. My self-esteem was really raised. Another thing we know and that we can put into our courses is that spaced learning in small chunks, the same thing or repetition over time, is much better than cramming it into one full day of training. And we know that retrieval practice, bringing the information back up again and practicing it, is the way to retain information. It improves retention. And finally, we know that games, stories, and challenges get people engaged, improve motivation, and help with retention. Because stories are pretty much the way humans have learned for many, many years. So I have an example of an interesting way to approach financial literacy. And it's by Liquid Interactive. Are they in Melbourne, anyone? Well, they're somewhere in Australia. Liquid Interactive created a financial literacy game. It's for high school students, but I think the idea could easily work for adults. When a student first enters, they see apps, and the goal of the game is to increase their net worth. And they click on the different apps and they learn how to open a bank account. So it's a simulation. They learn how to open a credit card or apply for a credit card. They learn how to make some investments. And they're supposed to check the apps very frequently so they can see how their money's growing. And then they can even decide what to buy. And in the end, if your net worth has increased, then you've done well. So this kind of simulation, this kind of repetition and practice are just the kinds of things that can work today for learning. And because they have to check the apps every day, they're getting spaced learning. So one way I like to think of this is in terms of friction, points of friction. In user interface design and user experience design, a point of friction is anything that inhibits someone from reaching their goal. You go to that horrible website that looks like it was made in the 1980s, and you can't figure out what to do, and you have point of friction, point of friction, point of friction. You eventually give up. And your favorite websites, let's say your favorite shopping website, it's smooth and it's nice, easy interaction. Well, why can't we do that with learning? Why can't we stop and think about where are the points of friction in this user's journey or this learner's journey, and how can we get rid of it? And here's an example of what I mean. A few years ago, I was trying to find an Airbnb apartment in Barcelona. So I was going to stay for 5 weeks, and 5 days, and I had that romantic idea. I want to live like the people there. I can't even speak any Spanish. I want to go buy food like they do and cook and do everything the way they do and learn about them. So I go to Airbnb, and this was several years ago. And the first thing that happens is I'm having trouble communicating. It's no one's fault. I don't know Spanish, and the person doesn't know English. And we're communicating through Google Translate. Well, who knows what I really said to her. But anyway, that was what I would call a point of friction. And then somehow I got the idea from her that when I get to the airport, I have to call someone. So that was like a little bit scary. Like, I don't even know how to make a phone call in Spain. I got to figure all that out. I have to talk to someone else. That's another point of friction. When I make the phone call, the person really knows no English, and I know about 10 words of Spanish. Somehow we communicated that I would get to the house soon, but there was a lot of traffic, and I think we had trouble getting through customs because I looked, like I could be committing a crime. So when I finally got there, she was a little bit angry with me because she had waited like hours for me. So all in all, my experience had so many points of friction when I've had to stop and think, do I really want to use Airbnb again? And then I went to their site for this trip because I'm traveling for a while, and I noticed they had instant booking. I wouldn't have to talk to anyone. I mean, I feel really bad that I only know one language, but that's the reality of my life. So by having instant booking on Airbnb, it cuts out all these points of friction that I had. And I'm wondering if we can't do that in our 21st century learning and development team, if we can't start to think about how can we cut out these points of friction. And we're going to be doing an exercise in a little while that includes that. You're going to have a chance to reflect on that today. So what roles are emerging for us? Well, I can't really predict the future, but I can just say what I see. And certainly I see that supporting learning is a role that's emerging. I see a lot of people doing it now, and I think we will continue to do it. And I have some great and interesting examples to show you of ways that people are supporting learning. Another role that I think that we can do, and I don't know if I see enough people doing this, is empowering the workforce. We can help people become self-directed learners. We can help people figure out the tools, and then they can do things themselves. We don't have to do it all. We don't have to curate for 10,000 different topics. We can get other people to do that once we turn them on to the tools and platforms. And finally, I think that people in our industry are so talented that we can actually be change agents and create change in this world. And one of the reasons I think that is because if you ever sat in at a meeting with an internal or external client and you suddenly notice all the problems that they're having, they're trying to create some training, they don't know what the policies are, they don't even know who their audience members are. There's so many issues where we're just put down right in the center of all of their issues. So I think that we can find ways, we know how to do analysis, we can find ways to look at the big picture and try to create change. I think it's easier to do if you're a manager or a supervisor, but even if you're not, just as one person alone, you can make slight suggestions, saying things like, have you considered that this may not be a training problem? Have you considered that humans can't retain a 150-page manual? Things like that. Very polite. So when we talk about supporting learning, I'm talking about providing resources and assets to improve work performance. And I'm guessing quite a few people in this room are doing that now. Can you raise your hand if you feel that you're doing performance support? Okay. And then I have to assume that there's about 15 more who don't like to raise their hand. You have to find some other technique, Shake your head, stomp on the floor. So here's some ways, just 3 ways that we can support learning, and there are so many more. First of all, we can support learning in the workflow, right at the moment of need. When somebody needs some information, they can just get it. We can also support learning by doing curation. We can do content curation, find the information that might help people, gather it together, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And we can help develop communities of practice. And like I said, we don't have to be the community manager for 10 people. We can tell people about the whole concept of a community of practice and get them to choose someone who can run the community. So back in the day, we were always making job aids, these kinds of things, little quick guides, and they still work. They work great. I do a lot of medical working with hospitals, and checklist, your basic paper checklist, saves lives, reduces infection. So there's nothing wrong with old-fashioned job aids. But we can also make them on the computer. This is one for people who do heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And it's just a mobile app, and it helps them figure out how to do the duct work, how much duct work they will need. Or like Adobe Capture CC, it's for designers. You can get that app, and when you find a pattern or a color palette that you like, you can capture it and bring it into your Adobe products. What a great idea. Some of you are familiar with Jane Bozarth. She created this simple, I guess you would call it a first day at work job aid. And she said she gets more congratulations and thank yous from this than almost anything she's ever done. And all she did was, she works for the state of North Carolina in the United States. And you know how awkward it is your first day at work, you're kind of overwhelmed, you don't know where to go or what to do. She created a Pinterest page or board, and it shows who they will see first, what they will do next, where the kitchen is, where the meeting rooms are, who they will meet with. And people look at that the first day of work before they get there, and they feel relaxed. And they feel like, oh, okay, now I know what's going to go on. So simple. Have you ever noticed that in great design, sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution? And sometimes it's really hard to get simple because you want to make things complex. That's just the way we are. Have you heard of chatbots? Has anyone been shopping or something and gotten a little conversation from the computer? Well, chatbots are small programs that mimic human conversation. And they can be just simple rules, or they can be using some level of artificial intelligence. I interviewed for this presentation someone who created a chatbot from the learning and development industry to help people find the information they need. Because the knowledge worker spends about 2.5 hours per day, or roughly 30% of the workday, searching for information. Does that sound familiar? Some people are nodding their heads. I know. Between searching for information and searching for stock photos, I mean, that's pretty much all I do all day. I don't know how I get anything done. Anyway, Ravinda Sunath started a company with a partner called Tacit. And they created a chatbot that runs in Slack, which is a messaging app if you haven't heard of it. And it connects people with the information they need. And they had to personalize or personify the chatbot. So the chatbot's name is Obi, and you think of Obi as your digital teammate. So Obi's going to run in Slack, and you can ask Obi questions. So here is what they have on their website. They show a picture of how it works in Slack, and I wanted to make it so that you could read it. So someone might say, does anyone know what the brand colors are? I can never find them. Someone says, ask Obi. Now don't forget, this is a bit of an advertisement. Obi, what are the brand colors? Now Obi, this chatbot, has search capabilities and can go out there into the organizational documents and search through every document till it finds what you need. And it can do it very quickly, and it learns because it's artificial intelligence. Obi comes back with the brand colors, and you can click and it says show more, and more colors will display. And then that's so handy. Thanks, Obi. So this is another way, certainly futuristic, but it is happening now, just like you were saying. You can buy a chatbot, and there are even some free ones, and put it into a messaging system and use it for search. It's a great idea. Now here's something that they've done right at DeakinCo. And if I get it wrong, I am sure someone will correct me. They created a tool called Gauge to guide managers through performance conversations with employees. So, for example, a manager wants to interview an employee maybe for about 15 minutes to find out who would be a good match for that person as a mentor. and also as a mentee. So really what they're using it for is to find out the capabilities of the employee. And the tool guides people through a conversation. So you log in, you say what aspect of work you want to speak to the person about. And if I have this correct, it brings in competencies, standards from many different fields. Do I have it right so far? Okay. I was tutored for several hours. And as the manager is speaking to the employee, there's this guide of questions. And the manager can rate how well the person knows this topic. And one of the ways that the performance app works is that it helps you ask behavioral type questions, so that you can say behavioral interviewing. So you can say, tell me about the last time you created a user interface and what were the problems you dealt with. And then according to the person's answer, you can rate their answer as to how skilled they are. And the best part of the whole thing is that afterwards, at the end of the conversation, a dashboard displays with information and recommendations. The information on the dashboard is how well does this person's competencies compare within the company, and how well does this person's competencies compare with the larger world. If anybody has any questions, ask Aaron. So this is more or less how it works. Now that is an amazing performance support app. The point is that the dashboard, by looking at the dashboard, people are matched up with the appropriate mentors and mentees. Now let's move on to curation. Curation is another way that we can support learners. And if you're not familiar with curation, it's kind of like being the curator of a gallery, but in this case, you're the curator of content. It provides meaning to disorganized information, and curation really takes over where search engines leave off. Personally, I haven't been amazed at Google search results lately. There's a lot of ads at the top, and the hits are not always great. So that's where human curation comes in. A curator will find, filter, organize, and annotate information or content. And as I said before, you don't have to be the one who curates for every single group in your company or organization. You just have to tell people, hey, this is a thing. You can do this, and here's the platform you might want to use, or here are 3 platforms to choose from. And here's an example of a curation page about user experience design in Scoop It. And there are ones that you can use internally, and there are ones that you can use outside of your company intranet. So content curation is another role that we can take on or teach people about in the future. And finally, the third way that I think we can support learners is to help them create communities of practice. You don't have to be the community manager, but you have to let people know that there is such a thing, because people might not realize they can have that in their company. And I was just so impressed with this person, Patty Bryant. She's a freelance learning experience designer. And she created a community of practice for independent people because she wanted to learn from them, and she wanted to help people with their problems. She started out with just in November 2015, and she already has 700 plus LinkedIn members. They all converse with each other in Slack. So if you were a freelancer, probably some people are, wouldn't it be great to be able to ask someone a question? How do you deal with what this client is saying to me? I haven't been paid in 3 months. What should I do? And they have live meetings twice a month in Zoom, and Zoom works really well. I did a webinar for them on visual design, and Zoom works really well. I could see all the participants, and they could see me, and I believe it's a free product. Empowering the workforce, that is another role that we can take on. And I don't know how many people are doing this in the workplace. I don't hear too much about it. But when you empower people, You hand them the tools and the skills to be independent, self-directed learners. And that is probably the best gift you can give anyone. Isn't that what school's all about? To learn how to become an independent learner? All right, put it like this. Isn't that what school should be about? So here are 3 possible ways that we can empower the workforce. One is to help people create personal learning environments. Another is to educate people about the importance of showing their work. And finally, enabling collaboration. So a personal learning environment, if you're not familiar with the term, and if you want to be really trendy, you can call it PLE, and people will be so impressed. So a personal learning environment is the platforms and tools that you use for your own individualized learning. So you probably have your own personal learning environment, but you may not have called it that. But you can educate others in your organization that they too can create personal learning environments. Because we get a little, so many people in our industry are so used to doing searches, reading blogs, being in LinkedIn groups, but there's a whole segment of the population that is not doing that. And you can help educate people to be able to use the tools and platforms to create their own personal learning environments. And here's an example of such a simple way that Mike Taylor did this. Every summer, he provides a technology education, and he calls it his online summer camp. And all he did was put up a WordPress blog, and I've put up like 20 of these blogs. They literally take 5 minutes to install through a web host. They're very easy to install. It takes a little while to get used to the back end of it and to learn how to blog on it, but it's very, very easy. So every week he created a page with information about one tool. So it was blogging one week, personal knowledge management another week, Twitter another week, and he taught people how to use all these tools so that they can create their own personal learning environment. And you know how on blogs it'll often have comments? Well, he gave assignments and had people respond in the comments section. So here was week 20, personal knowledge management. And I think he told me that he was going to do it again this summer. So that's another one of those simple solutions that we can do for our organizations to help people understand, because look at all the tools, and this isn't even all of them. These are some of the tools and platforms that people can use to create their own personal learning environments. I mean, it's astounding. What did we do 10 years ago? Now, another really great way to empower people is to encourage them to show their work. Jane Bozarth again, boy, you'd think I'd be her agent or something. She wrote this great book, Show Your Work. And she's not the first person who came up with this idea, but she wrote a lot about it and publicized it. And what it is about is encouraging people to talk out loud, show how they do things. Take that tacit knowledge, that hidden knowledge that you've gained from experience, and bring it out. Because companies in the Fortune 500 still lose a combined $31.5 billion per year from employees failing to share knowledge effectively. Because as soon as someone leaves, that knowledge is gone. There's no succession planning in most places. And there's no need to hoard knowledge. If you teach 3 people how to do something that you do, it's just going to bring you all up. People are sharing knowledge by creating videos, by blogging, by sharing on Twitter. And I did something like that on my website. I showed how I used an illustrator to create a story for learning. And I showed, and as I was saying the other day, you have to kind of drop the curtain and show people your dirty, messy work. So I showed people my silly little storyboards where I took one of those articulate presenter characters and drew a silly little cape on them. And you can see how it's in the comic book format, and you can see that's not great. I'm not proud of that storyboard. That's just the way it is. We make messy, quick storyboards, and you hand them over to somebody. So I handed it over to an illustrator, and this is what he came back with, a freelance illustrator. I was thrilled. But by showing my work, now other people know, oh, I can hire an illustrator on Upwork. Oh, I don't have to make this fantastic storyboard. The deadline was so tight for this project that by the end I wasn't even doing any graphics. I was just putting words in, and the illustrator was able to interpret it. Here's another fascinating use of showing your work. Surgeons are using Google Glass, which is still around, and it's being used in medical situations, and teaching people how to do surgery live. Well, teaching residents, not just anyone. One time I worked on a surgery course and I tried to eat lunch while I was doing it. Oh my God. You don't want to eat lunch during surgery. So showing your work is a great way to reduce friction and spread the word, empowering people. And finally, enabling collaboration. Again, you don't have to be the IT person who sets it up. You just have to be the person who says, look, I see someone over here and I see someone over here, and if they communicated, it would be fantastic. I have this example of Amy Ahern from Acumen. One big criticism of MOOCs is that people don't really converse and speak to each other. And Acumen was very interested in finding a way to change that. So she followed, Seth Godin had done this, and she decided she was going to try this out. She created a MOOC that took place, again, completely in Slack, a messaging system, because you can drop videos into it. And she picked a really controversial topic, and she opened it up to the public. And they would drop videos in and ask people to discuss. And because it was done in a messaging app, the entire course was done in a messaging app, people started to collaborate. They started to discuss. They started to listen to each other's opinions and give their own. All because they were in a tool that enabled it. So I just thought that was kind of a brilliant way to go about improving what's going on with MOOCs, because they do need some improvement. And finally, I think that we can create change. I have faith in every person in this industry that you can be a change agent, even if you're not a manager or supervisor, just by making small changes. Someone at the AITD conference, Shahana, was speaking about making micro changes, really small little changes, replacing one small thing with something new. And over time, it starts to build. When you're a change agent, you provide leadership and vision to achieve positive change or transformation. And here are 3 ways I think we can do this. First of all, we have to have a transformative vision. We have to think, how can this be better? What can we do to make this a little bit better? We have to be able to find innovative solutions, and it doesn't mean that you have to do it alone. You can speak with others. You can learn techniques for creative thinking, design thinking, systems thinking. There's so much information about how to get over our own minds and step outside of them. I won't say think out of the box, though, so you can thank me for that. And in the end, what we can do as change agents is to ensure that learning and development is relevant. We have to have our pulse on how things are changing in the future and predict and figure out ways that we can bring learning and work closer together. And I have faith in everyone here that you can do that. Look at this example. David Swaddle from Learning Plan. He had to create what they originally wanted was courses to teach retailers about Samsung phones. But it turns out that the retailers were all young adults some of them in college, just working on the weekends who wanted to pick up a little money. The last thing they wanted to do was to take some courses. Courses that were, demanded upon the youngsters. What he decided to do was to create campaign-based learning events. So it was just like a marketing event, but instead it was a campaign of learning events. So what it was is, just like in marketing, they do pre-launch, and then they do the launch, and then the post-launch. He did exactly that, but for learning. So the pre-launch consisted of some emails and some teasers that help people get kind of interested. He created buzz, just like you would in a marketing campaign. And then during the launch, they sent out regular emails to the retail workers, and they would have links to a little bit of information. They created a learning portal, but it was really more like a news portal. And in those emails, they would see user reviews, they would see advertisements, they would see videos about the phone. And it helped people understand what the objections were. It helped them be better at sales, and it helped them understand the phone better. So for example, this was on week 1. They could look at their phone. All of the learning was on the phone or on the desktop. So they're standing there at work. They see something that's kind of a little bit enticing. It says you're going to do a game. It says crack the code. And then they have little, in this case, word searches. And there were all kinds of different games and videos. And then there would be links to news stories that they wanted the retailers to learn about, the retail workers to learn about. But it was all through links, all through kind of like basically a marketing campaign. Now that's a really smart idea, I thought, to get young people who they don't really care about the phone. They just want to make a little money over the weekends. And here's another great example. J.D. Dillon, when he worked for Kaplan, which is a higher education and professional organization, when he came to work there, he discovered that all the different groups were completely siloed, and there was no one way to do things. Every group had their own SharePoint site. Every group had their own little way of doing things. So he decided he would like to create one wiki, which, if you're familiar with Wikipedia, which I guess everyone is, it's simply software that works in the browser and allows people to edit, delete, revise, and add information. He got a lot of resistance from this, and in fact, to be able to put up the wiki, he wasn't able to do it until his boss left. A lot of people thought, this really isn't a learning and development function. But he knew in the end it kind of was, because what we do can have an impact on an entire organization. So we started a wiki with 500 pages and a small group of people who were interested in it. Within 1 year, there were 1 million page views. People really started to like it. Within 3 years, he went from 500 to 70,000 pages because different groups kept saying, oh, would you put my stuff up there? Hey, here's my stuff. Here are my policies. Here are my documents. People just found it was easier. He reduced the number of courses he had to create by 50%. How many people here have created a course that you knew could be done another way? I sure have. So this is the kind of actions that you can take to be a change agent, coming up with innovative solutions or making small micro changes. I think the people in our industry can inspire others with our innovative thinking. And here are some things that I think would be interesting to learn if you're trying to look at what you can do next. Of course, no one person can know all of these things, but see if any of these things interest you and you can start pursuing them. One is design thinking, which is a very collaborative way of working with audience members and coming up with innovative solutions. Another is systems thinking, which is a way of looking at the whole picture and seeing how different parts interact. Another is creative thinking. A lot of people say, I am creative or I am not creative, but actually creative thinking can be learned. And there are many, many techniques for being able to get better at creative thinking. So you can search for those. Learning about agile development, agile software development, failing fast, failing quickly, that's another area that may interest you that you can start to pursue. I don't really see how we can avoid learning about user experience. It's so important, and it should be really tied in with instructional design. You may want to focus on becoming familiar with many platforms and tools so that you can become a resource for the people in your organization. What about marketing? So often, what we have to present to people, and perhaps they don't even think that it's going to be worthwhile for them. So learning a little bit about marketing, learning about persuasion, can help make your job easier. Visualizing. Graphics are definitely the language of the 21st century. Graphics and visuals are becoming, more prominent in our society. And just getting used to visualizing your content, visualizing your concepts, being able to just sketch. All you have to do to visualize is to be able to sketch geometric shapes and stick figures, and you can get your ideas across. And finally, analytics. Analytics doesn't interest everyone, but if you have a little bit of a knack or interest in statistics, you can help your organization make data-driven decisions. You can learn to work with big data sets. Now, how much time do we have left? Okay, we're doing well. Remember when we were talking about points of friction? I would like you to stop and reflect now and think about the journey that a learner or a user in your organization has. A journey that's not very good, perhaps a journey that has many points of friction. Why don't you take your pen and pencil? You can turn it over if you prefer a blank sheet. And draw out one user journey. Some system at work, some experience that has a lot of points of friction. Just reflect for a minute and see if you can come up with something. The next part of this has two instructions. The first one is, let everyone at your table know about your journey with the points or experience with all the points of frictions. And as a group, pick out one to work on. Could be the most interesting, could be the most horrible, could be the one with the most points of friction. And after you choose one, collaborate and work with your group using sticky notes. Because that allows you to move things around, create a better user experience, create a better user journey. Get rid of some points of friction. Try to think innovatively and find a new way to approach that experience. So work as a group, work as a team, and pick out one journey, and then see if you can reduce the points of friction. Okay, we would like to hear from just a few groups. I hope you had a very great discussion. It looked like people were having a good discussion on ways to remove points of friction. And now Sanji is going to share what her group came up with, and then it would be great if we could get one more before.
Yeah, we're taking one for the team. Okay, so our journey was the journey of a user in our organisation using the PMO. The PMO is a newly established entity within our area. So what's the value and what's the touch points? How do they use the PMO, and effectively how is it integrated? So starting at the very beginning was when someone has an idea, how do they get it to the PMO to even get assessed to be turned into a project? There is a premature process which has been rolled out and everybody should know how it's done. That's not the case. There are definitely issues with the process itself, but also the awareness of it. So we mind mapped 6 key things at the very beginning where somebody has to engage the PMO. How do we make that journey easy for them so that they can turn this idea into a potential project? What is it that they need? How do they access things? And one of them was firstly using our Yammer site for awareness and using it constantly as a source of truth or a source of update to say these are the things happening with the forum. The second one is creating the single source of truth, so the SharePoint site or ideally an online portal which they can just fill in the information quite easily. Secondly, it's t-shirt, very simple t-shirt sizing of the idea so that we can then categorise them. Secondly, it's aligning every single idea to our core competencies within the company. So we shouldn't be running projects unless it aligns with our strategic directions. And fifth is the governance, kind of a little bit lacking. Assessing if the project's actually viable from a financial perspective as well as all of the other metrics. And sixth, which ties into that last point, making people accountable for the budgets and the projects that are coming through by outlining RACIs and making sure that they're involved in the process of approving this project, because they can't approve it unless they're going to take ownership.
That's great. And would this new approach reduce the friction, make things smoother?
It would definitely go a long way. At the moment, because that people don't know what step 1 is, every other step afterwards gets missed.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. I have a mic here.
Hi, my name's Cara. I'm from National Australia Bank. The user journey that we spoke about was our frontline bankers becoming accredited to use their credit authority. So our bankers will have different levels at which they can lend money to. When they first come into role, we expect them to demonstrate their competency across a number of capabilities, and at the end there's a workplace assessment as well, and then they're allowed to go and lend to their heart's content. It's not a fabulous process for the banker, so they come in, they're expected to negotiate a SharePoint portal, another database to confirm their individual requirements. They've then got to manually enroll in everything in SAP Learning, and then hopefully they magically navigate and find the right pathway, enroll in everything correctly, and then get it all ticked off and the database updates correctly so that they are ticked off and green. So you can imagine that's fraught with challenge for our poor bankers. One of the other things is we recruit someone from the Blue Bank who's got 20 years of experience, and we don't recognise that and make them start from scratch again. So it's a pretty poor experience at this stage, and I know Paul is looking at me there quite intently, but it's a big challenge that we're still into. So, some of the things that we talked about for removing those points of friction, we're having a one-stop shop for the banker. So they come in, they say, this is what I need to do. They're not trying to negotiate 3 different sources of truth. That they are able to then have that prior knowledge and experience recognised, that they can then just target their actual skill gaps, and that at the end they're able to have a more guided, structured and robust conversation with their manager about those skill gaps and what they need to do going forward. So it sounds kind of simple when I say it like that, but
that's great.
I'm daunted by the prospect.
Yeah, well, simple is a good step in design, so congratulations.
Look, thank you very much. I mean, I think
My pleasure.
we've talked about the importance of, or the rapidly changing nature of work and the skills that we need to help people develop, but it's probably more incumbent on us as learning professionals to lead our own development in that regard, and to take on this role as providing performance solutions in a different way to what we have in the past. And Connie, I think you've given us some really practical examples of that's achievable now. And I know many people in this group are already doing that, and certainly anyone that's interested in talking more around design thinking, some of those approaches, please reach out to DeakinCo. But if we can have a final round of applause for Connie, and thank you very much.
Thank you.